Hey everyone and welcome back to the channel. I hope you guys are doing amazing as always, and it's me Joe as always, and today I want to talk about 3D horror movies. Something that just is not around anymore and something that I'm really interested in, and it's just such an interesting topic to talk about, right? So back in the 80s, 3D movies were extremely popular just because it was something new, it was something exciting, especially in the early 80s. 3D movies were big. And also 3D horror movies were pretty big, including all the big franchises. So for example, obviously Friday the 13th Part 3 is like probably one of the most famous examples of 3D horror movies from the 80s. And it is a good movie. I love Friday the 13th Part 3. It's actually my second favorite Friday the 13th movie. And the 3D just added this sort of goofiness to it, but it's sort of, and cheesiness, but at the same time, it works really well, in my opinion. You know, some people are saying that looking at it now, the 3D effects, they look goofy, bad. And I mean, they do, but I think they just add this sort of playfulness to it. I enjoy those 3D horror movies from the 80s, right? We got Amityville 3D from 1983, which is really interesting that, you know, of all the horror franchises, Amityville was the one to go and make a 3D horror movie. You know, that's pretty interesting. Also, Jaws 3D. That's a very famous example. The third Jaws movie, Jaws 3D, got a 3D movie, Jaws 3D, so they sort of included it in the title. And even though Jaws 3D is pretty awful, and I think that most people, when they talk about Jaws 3D, all they remember is like the shark going through that glass, and it looks obviously awful. It looks really, really bad, but that's sort of the most famous moment from Jaws 3D. Personally, I don't like this movie, and I think that the 3D stuff in Jaws 3D is like the most gimmicky, and it's just so just over the top bad. Again, I think that the contrast between Jaws 3D, for example, and Friday the 13th Part 3, where I think the utilization of those 3D effects, I think it worked really well. In Jaws 3D, you know, wasn't a big fan of that. So yeah, in the early 80s, 3D movies were popular, including 3D horror movies. And then in the 90s, early 2000s, it just sort of, you know, ended. There was nothing, you know? Obviously, we got some 3D movies, but when it comes to the 3D horror movie craze, it was over. You know, it ended in like late 80s / early 90s, right? So another spike in popularity when it comes to 3D horror movies was in the mid / late 2000s and the early 2010s. And we got a bunch of horror movies that were, you know, they got 3D releases, right? Or 3D versions. It's sort of interesting also the way some of this stuff, some of these movies were released, because some of them only got like, some theaters only got like 2D, and then some theaters got 3D versions of the movie, and you know, like, it's just a very interesting topic, you know, but I don't want to talk about all of it because, you know, it would be a long, boring video, so I just want to go over the sort of the most important things. So, for example, Texas Chainsaw 3D, the infamous reboot of Friday the 13th, of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, right? And that movie is awful, you know? It's really bad. I really don't like Texas Chainsaw 3D. However, the 3D effects are really good in that movie, and it sort of makes sense, right? Because it's Texas Chainsaw, and Leatherface is just, he's just crazy with the chainsaw all the time in the movie, and it really looks interesting. And I actually got the Blu-ray, and I'm gonna get to that, like how you can watch these movies nowadays, but I actually got a 3D Blu-ray version of Texas Chainsaw. Now, another thing that, or another movie that was supposed to release in 3D was Rob Zombie's Halloween 3, right? Because Rob Zombie made those two Halloween movies, right? He made the remake and then he made a sequel to it, titled Halloween 2. But in the works was also Halloween 3 from him, and that movie was supposed to be in 3D. So we essentially missed out on the only Halloween movie with Michael Myers in 3D. That's so interesting, right? It would have been bad, but honestly, a 3D horror movie with Michael Myers, that's so interesting. So cool. Anyway, we also got the Piranha movie in 3D. We also got the My Bloody Valentine remake in 3D. So a lot of interesting stuff, you know? Now, when it comes to how to watch these movies nowadays, right? With the 80s movies, it's quite simple. Because these movies, they use sort of that simple 3D technology, meaning the only thing you really need are those sort of cheap 3D glasses, and then you obviously just need the movie. And so it's quite simple to watch those 3D movies from the 80s, right? Because the technology was simple, so it kind of makes sense. What's harder though is to watch the 3D movies from the mid slash late 2000s slash early 2010s, like Texas Chainsaw 3D or Piranha 3D or My Bloody Valentine 3D. Because those movies, they came out on Blu-ray 3D, right? And for that, you need a 3D TV and a 3D compatible Blu-ray player, right? So that's kind of weird, like how complicated it was, and I think thanks to that, the 3D Blu-rays essentially disappeared. Even Avatar, The Way of Water, which, came out in IMAX in 3D, and I loved it, by the way, in 3D. It was an amazing experience, but even that movie, when it came to Blu-ray, there's no 3D version on Blu-ray. So essentially 3D Blu-rays are dead now. Now I do have a 3D TV that, I still have from 2011. My parents got it for me when I was a kid. And they even got me the 3D Blu-ray player and also the special 3D glasses. So I actually wanted to sell it back in the day, like 6 years ago. But then I was like, you know what, it's kind of fun to watch these 3D movies from time to time. So I actually kept it and I still have it and I'm watching those movies from time to time. And it's a lot of fun, And I do have My Bloody Valentine 3D and also Texas Chainsaw 3D. And then I have like a bunch of non-horror 3D movies. And it's a lot of fun, right? So yeah, 3D movies were interesting. I'm not gonna say are interesting because the 3D age is like, it's over pretty much, except few movies coming out, like the second Avatar movie or, a movie here or there that comes out in 3D. But in general, the 3D phase of horror cinema is sort of over. And it was interesting, I gotta say, and it's something spicy, it's something new, it's exciting, right? Now, in many movies, it was a gimmick, for sure, but at the same time, in some movies, it was really interesting and something, just to spice up that movie. Just a thing that made it a little more interesting to watch. Anyway, guys, that's pretty much it when it comes to 3D horror movies. I'd be, I think I'd be for it if some horror movies were coming out in 3D again, just because it's so much fun, honestly. And I know that some people, honestly, with those movies from the 80s, your eyes will hurt. I don't know if it's because the technology is sort of simple or, because of the image being like red and blue, and so that makes your eyes hurt. I don't know, but I do have issues watching those movies. But when it comes to the more modern 3D movies, like Texas Chainsaw or My Bloody Valentine or Final Destination 5, I don't have any issues. But anyway, guys, that's it for today. Let me know your thoughts. Like, what do you think about 3D horror movies? And what, if you've seen some personally, or like, are you for 3D movies or are you against it and you just don't want 3D horror movies ever again? Anyway, guys, that's pretty much it for today. Thank you so much, as always, for watching. I'll see you next time. Take care, and bye.